Welcome back into day one of American Basketball Media Day. We'll be hearing from 5 of our schools here later on today. But first in the American studios, we have the pleasure to be joined by American Commissioner Mike Aresco. Mike, great to be here with you today. Really excited about what the American has in store for this season. When you take a look first on the women's side, 3 new head coaches last year. They finished 3 through 5 in the coaches poll. 2 new head coaches this season on the women's side. What impresses you most about the job that the athletic directors have done here in the conference with these hires?
Well, first of all, great to be with you, Morgan. It's clear that they have an eye for talented coaches, and they have obviously, we're a conference that sometimes has to replenish, our store of coaches, and they've done it really magnificently in women's basketball. And, we have some good men's coaches coming on, too. But clearly, they have an eye out for, coaches who can build programs, because that's what we need to do. We're building our women's program. We were at the top with UConn all those years, as you know, and now we have to rebuild a bit. But we've always had good teams like USF and UCF and others, and Cincinnati and Temple and others have been at the top from time to time. Tulane, Lisa Stockton, of course, is a legend. So we've had good women's basketball, but now we're on the cusp of, I think, really developing a broader, strength across the conference.
Speaking of programs at the top, when we take a look at the men's side with Houston and what Coach Sampson has done there, a Final Four, then followed by an Elite Eight, and now high expectations again this season. How has Houston really added to the entire conference and just really strengthened this conference as a whole? Well,
there's no question that they've been our premier team, the last few years, and it's a tribute to Kelvin, and it's been longer than that, really. In 2018, as you know, they easily could have gone to the Final Four. They had the heartbreaking loss, to Michigan. Kelvin's just done a remarkable job, and he's also one of the great people. He's supported our conference to the max. But no, Houston going to a Final Four and going to an Elite Eight and having a shot again at the Final Four, it's done a lot for our conference. There's no question about it. And I've had game day at Houston. It's just been a tremendous run, and it's going to continue this year. Of course, it's great to have that buzz, to know that they're a national championship contender. That elevates the entire league, and so it's great to have them where they are.
Commissioner, it's great to have you, and I know you have some remarks here, so I'll let you take it away.
Thank you, Morgan. First of all, as I said earlier, it's a pleasure to join, Morgan here for our basketball media days, and I appreciate the great work that she does on behalf of the conference. I also want to thank Mark Adams and Brooke Weisbro for joining us in the studio the next 2 days and offering their expertise. Great to have them. We're extremely excited formally to begin our basketball seasons with our annual media days. We go into every season confident in our place as one of the best conferences in Division I, and we expect that to be the case once again. There's no doubt that football is at the center of much of the business of college athletics these days, but please make no mistake, men's and women's basketball are essential components to a successful conference, and make no mistake, we are very much an outstanding basketball conference, and it means a great deal to us. Our pedigree in basketball has been a critical part of our growth from our first season as the American Athletic Conference a decade ago, when we had a member school win both the men's and women's national championships. In our first 9 seasons, we've had a combined, a group of 4 NCAA championship teams, 2 men's Final Four teams, 6 women's Final Four teams, and an NIT champion. And that's quite a series of achievements. Our roster of head coaches has included multiple Hall of Famers, National Coaches of the Year as well. And I'm obviously not oblivious to the fact that some of those accomplishments came from schools like UConn and Louisville, which are no longer in our conference. But the fact remains, and it's important to note, that those highlights happened in the American, and we take great pride in that, and it's part of our legacy. The schools that will be departing in July of 2023 have also done great things in the American, Houston, Cincinnati, and UCF. And look no further than last season, when Houston's men's team reached the Elite Eight of the NCAA tournament, and UCF's women's team won the conference championship and took UConn to the wire in stores, no less, in the second round of the NCAA tournament. 2 years ago, Houston went to the Final Four, another great milestone in our conference. And again, those teams did that with the Americans' A on their uniforms, and we celebrate those accomplishments, and we always will. I particularly want to acknowledge and congratulate Kelvin Sampson, whose many accomplishments on the court have elevated the University of Houston to a consistent national championship contender, and all the while, Kelvin has been a staunch advocate on behalf of our conference. No one has supported our efforts more, and I have valued his friendship greatly. Going forward, our priorities remain unchanged. Our conference will consist of institutions that are fully committed to competing at the highest level and competing for national championships. Those will always be our goals. These schools are investing their resources accordingly, and it will be a priority of ours to continue as national leaders as well in governance, compliance, scheduling, officiating, and in media exposure. I'm confident that as our conference continues to evolve, we will be able to amplify the great moments from our schools that have enjoyed recent success, incoming schools that have enjoyed recent success like North Texas and UAB, and they'll be coming in obviously this summer, as well as those with a longer and deeper pedigree like Charlotte, which went to a Final Four, although many years ago. There are a few people that I would like to acknowledge at the outset before we begin the formal program. Tulane President Michael Fitz serves as the chair of the board of our conference, and SMU President Gerald Turner is our vice chair. They both provide tremendous support and guidance on behalf of the conference. I would also like to recognize Rick Hart of SMU as chair of our athletic directors, John Gilbert of East Carolina as our vice chair, and Lauren Ashman of Memphis, who is chair of our senior women administrators. Rick is our AD's liaison with our men's basketball coaches as well, and Arthur Johnson of Temple is our liaison with our women's basketball coaches group. We have one new athletic director since the last time we gathered. I'd like to welcome Kevin Saul of Wichita State. I want to recognize Carl Hicks, our Associate Commissioner for Basketball, and Erica Holmes, our Director of Basketball Operations. They do a fantastic job on behalf of our schools with the administration of all aspects of our men's and women's basketball programs. And we've combined those roles, and I think it's worked out extremely well. And I know that many of you have joined me in celebrating Tom O'Jackson, who retired from the conference last week after a legendary, and I don't throw that term around loosely, legendary 40-year career. I'd like to recognize Kari Black as well, a former basketball student athlete at Tulsa, incidentally, who has been elevated to our senior staff to oversee our television and multimedia efforts. Kari has worked closely with Tom for a number of years, but you can't, Tom O'Jackson has his days at ESPN in their formative years, his days at the Big East in the Big East heyday, his time here at the American building our conference, his approach to everything, his friendship, his knowledge, which is encyclopedic, everything contributed to, again, what I consider his legendary status. And we'll miss him. But Kari, who has worked with Tom and worked with Tom on many things, will do a great job filling in. We're lucky to have him with us. I also want to acknowledge the efforts of our officiating coordinators, Mike Eads in men's basketball, and Debbie Williamson in women's basketball. We are part of a consortium with the SEC in men's basketball, and that's worked extremely well for us on that side of things. Both of our coordinators are highly respected, and they give us access to the highest-rated game officials nationally, and that's, as you know, very important. There's nothing more important than good officiating, as we all know. I also want to thank ESPN, which televises the majority of our games and has been a great partner over the years, as well as CBS, which televises some key weekend men's games, very important to us. But ESPN, as our primary partner, has done a great deal for the league in terms of the way they promote us, the way they value us. And I want to thank Jimmy Pitaro and Burke Magnus and Nick Dawson. We really appreciate the support they give us. They've just been wonderful. And again, I want to thank Sean McManus at CBS and David Burson for the support they give us, because obviously having the broadcast network doing our games is also very important and has been very important to us. Also, the network of the NCAA tournament. And I'm a veteran of both ESPN and CBS, and it's been we're with two of the great media companies in the world. As I mentioned earlier, we've always had an outstanding roster of head coaches, and this year is not going to be any exception. We have 3 new head coaches in men's basketball. We'll welcome Michael Schwartz at East Carolina, Rob Lanier at SMU, and Eric Conkle at Tulsa. And in women's basketball, we welcome 2 new coaches, Satya Messer at UCF and Diane Richardson at Temple. And Morgan alluded to the outstanding coaches that we've hired and the fact that they have their teams in the preseason rankings pretty highly. I am excited about the influx of coaching talent among our women's programs, as I mentioned. We have some of the best coaches in the nation in women's basketball with veterans like Jose Fernandez at South Florida. Jose has been a great friend over the years. Lisa Stockton, who I mentioned, has achieved legendary status at Tulane. And we also have 3 new coaches, again, joining us who joined us last year, Toyelle Wilson at SMU, Katrina Merriweather at Memphis, and Angie Nelp at Tulsa. And all have done an outstanding job. And all 3 had to undertake something of a rebuilding effort. And I couldn't be more pleased with the direction that those programs are going in after only 1 year. SMU and Tulsa both returned to postseason play in the WNIT, and Memphis was a strong postseason contender as well. We'll be transitioning to an 18-game league schedule in women's basketball beginning next season, and that is a direct result of the top-to-bottom depth of our conference in women's basketball. I briefly mentioned the changes that are coming to our conference, but this is also a pivotal time for college basketball and all of college athletics. I spoke to that a bit in the summer at the football media day. In many ways, we're seeing that after many years of pretty much glacial change, we've now seen more fundamental changes in the way college athletics operates than perhaps at any point in the formation since the formation of the NCAA in 1906. I don't think that's an exaggeration. Globally, the introduction of compensation for student athletes' name, image, and likeness has opened the door to countless opportunities for our students to be treated in the same manner as any other student with extraordinary talents. The problem is that NIL has morphed into something that potentially could be viewed as pay-for-play, a recruiting and retention tool. It's not something that we necessarily, we obviously didn't want. It's something, the collectives, the establishment of collectives, not something that we necessarily foresaw. And we've really got to get a handle on this, and we've got to figure out the best way to make this a streamlined process while giving our student athletes the opportunity to capitalize on NIL opportunities, but also not to make it, a situation where you're really dealing in something that really isn't NIL. The modifications to transfer rules along with NIL has created what I consider essentially a perfect storm. The transfer rules do give student athletes more freedom over their college destinations, no question about that. We've seen that firsthand in our men's and women's basketball ranks. However, team fortunes can change quickly with the addition or subtraction of impact transfers, and roster instability may become an ongoing issue, and it's something that we're going to have to watch closely. There's more to come in terms of change as well. Just last week, the NCAA Transformation Committee forwarded its initial recommendations to the NCAA board, and those included the potential for expanded fields and postseason tournaments. This is a concept that we as a conference will study intensely with our athletic directors. We'll evaluate the impact not only for our conference, but for what we feel is the greater good of college sports. There was talk of expanding the NCAA men's tournament years ago to as many as 90 or 94 teams. The NCAA men's and women's tournaments in basketball, as we all know, are among the great sporting events in America. I mean, they're the best of the best. And any proposed fundamental changes really need to be carefully vetted. And they have to be in the best interest of our student athletes and for the greater enterprise, in the best interest of the greater enterprise. But along those lines, I applaud the Division I Council for its plan to introduce an additional NCAA-funded 32-team women's tournament to provide additional high-level postseason opportunities for our women players. This is an important step in the path to providing equal opportunities on a national level for our women's student athletes. Dan Gavitt and Lynn Holtzman do an excellent job in finding innovative ways to enhance college basketball in both men's and women's basketball, particularly in this time of great change. When talking about the postseason, I would be remiss if I didn't mention our own American Athletic Conference Championships in Fort Worth, which have been extraordinarily successful. And we started in the midst of the pandemic. Our first one was canceled. as was the NCAA tournament that year back in 2020. But ever since, we've had we had a terrific tournament last year, and we're going to have great tournaments in the future. This past season, as I mentioned, is the first one we were really able to stage our tournament as a week-long festival at Dickies Arena. And Dickies Arena is as fine a venue as there is in this country, and I invite all of our listeners and those watching to visit us there, because it's an absolutely wonderful place, and you'll see great basketball on the men's and women's side. Our women's and men's teams have given us feedback, and they've had nothing but positive things to say about the amenities and first-class treatment they receive at our championships. And again, the venue and the people who run the venue have a lot to do with that. I want to thank Matt Homan and his staff for their continued support. And I would like to acknowledge as well Bobby Wagand, our Associate Commissioner for Sport Administration, and his staff, because they do a lot of work. They work with Carl and Erica, and they help provide an outstanding championship experience for our student athletes and fans. In closing, I would like to thank the members of the media who are joining us for these 2 days. I know you'll enjoy hearing from our coaches and student athletes. This is an exciting time. It's an exciting time for our basketball. We think we have some national championship contenders. We know what Houston's done. We know what Memphis has done. We know what others in our conference are capable of doing. On the women's side, we have great programs all across, and USF has been a mainstay, but Houston is also developing a great program. There are others as well. So we're really pleased that we've got great basketball in this conference. It's hard to believe it's upon us already. It's here we are early in the fall, and everybody's talking about the rankings in football, but we've got great basketball on the horizon, and we're really excited about it. And again, our student athletes and coaches are great ambassadors, are outstanding ambassadors for our conference. I salute them, and I wish them well today. I know they'll have a lot to tell you. In addition, I wish them well as the season begins next month. This is going to be a tremendous season in the American, and I wish them all well, one and all. Thank you. Appreciate you having me, and thank you, Morgan.
Commissioner, thank you for those opening remarks, really getting us excited and starting off these 2 days here ahead of hearing from all of our teams. But first, we have some members of the media who have some questions for you. So I'm going to send things over to the American's Chuck Sullivan to get things going. Chuck, take it away.
Thanks, Morgan. Thanks, Mike. And thanks to members of the media for joining us this morning. For those in the chat, in the Zoom rather, if you just use the raise hand feature in the Zoom to get in the queue for questions, and we'll take about maybe 10 minutes of questions for Commissioner Aresco. We could start with Patrick Johnson in Greenville, please. Patrick, I just need you to unmute yourself if you would, and go ahead with your question.
Okay, Commissioner, thank you very much. Do appreciate it. There was a report recently about possible expansion to somewhere around 88, 90 teams of the NCAA tournament. Just wanted to get your comments on that. I mean, do you view that as a good thing, or is the 68 a good number in your mind? And it would seem like possibly a good thing for the American, which unfortunately is always kind of teetering of whether it's going to get multiple bids or not. Just wanted to get your reaction to that report that's kind of been out there the last couple of weeks.
Yes, thank you. And it, in some ways it came out of the blue because, as you know, I mentioned in my opening remarks that this had come up when the last deal was negotiated, and I was involved in that negotiation when I was at CBS back in 2010. 64 and then 68 is those are great numbers. They have worked extremely well. This tournament is the most popular tournament in the country. It is a unique event. There's nothing quite like it. And the question is, when you expand the field to that extent, if in fact we were to do that, do you water the tournament down? Do you diminish it at all? You obviously provide more opportunity for more teams. I imagine that there would be support for that. There would be support among coaches who would like a chance to be in the tournament, schools that would like a chance to be in the tournament. But the question then becomes, do you create some fatigue with viewers? I don't know. Maybe you create even more excitement. Obviously, you create more games, you create more inventory for the networks, but having been with CBS and then with ESPN prior, do the networks want that much inventory? Do they feel that they can adequately televise it, cover it? Does it have some impact on what the tournament is? And would there be a feeling that too many teams that maybe don't deserve to be in the tournament are in the tournament? On the other hand, it does give teams, I'm not going to dismiss the argument that it gives teams an opportunity who might not be there, and some of those teams might emerge and could potentially win, a championship. So there are pros and cons. We're going to study it. We're going to get the opinion of our athletic directors and our board, and we'll see ultimately how the college community views this. Again, it's a proposal that came up, relatively suddenly. There has been concern about the brackets in some sports not being large enough. I know Commissioner Sankey at the SEC has been concerned about the baseball bracket, possibly leaving out some very, very worthy teams, brackets that may not be as large. The tournament, typically, as you know, we always have arguments over those last dozen teams, and we've had arguments many years, as you know. And so a larger field would certainly help our conference in the sense that we've had some teams on the cusp that we felt were very worthy and had not been selected. And so there's always controversy, but it's not quite like football where there's a great controversy over whether you're in the top four. You're dealing with such a narrow range of teams. It hasn't been quite like that in the NCAA tournament. So, again, it's an interesting concept. It's one that clearly now seems to have some traction. It's going to get a pretty significant hearing, and we'll be part of that process.
Okay, we'll take the next question from John Titel with Hoops HD, please. John, just unmute yourself and go ahead with your question.
Thank you, and good morning, Commissioner. I just wanted to ask about the conference tournament location. The first 6 years in the conference, it shifted between Tennessee, Connecticut, and Florida. This is going to be the third straight March that it's been in Fort Worth. Is your preference to keep it in one location or to move it around in the future?
Thanks, John. It's a great question. No, we prefer to keep it in one location because we think we can build equity in that venue. We also have a great venue in Dickey's Arena. It is anybody who's ever been there just raves about it. It's an absolutely great place. There are really very few arenas in the country that can match it. And the town of Fort Worth, the city of Fort Worth, is a great location. There's plenty to do there. You have a festival atmosphere. The weather generally is good. In addition, it's a venue that is close to a lot of our schools. A lot of our schools can drive. Their fan base can drive to, we're going to have 4 schools in Texas beginning next year, in addition to, Tulsa and Wichita just up the road, and Memphis not far away, New Orleans. Our eastern teams can get to Dallas very easily. You have the best airport situation pretty much in the country here with the 2 airports. So in that sense, it's a central location for us, and it makes it very attractive because, again, fans can drive. I think there'll be interest in the local community as well. We moved it around in part because, we didn't have a home after we left Madison Square Garden, and we did get bids from a number of cities, and we felt that moving it around made sense. The bids change from year to year. We had great experiences in Orlando, although we didn't quite have the kind of crowds that we'll have in Fort Worth. Memphis. The problem, too, is that we did play on some basically home floors of some of our teams, even though, the Hartford Civic Center is not UConn's, home floor for most games. It still is in many ways. In Memphis, of course, it was their home floor. And that always creates some controversy when you do that because it does confer some advantage. In this case, we have a neutral venue that's absolutely spectacular, and we've combined our men's and women's tournaments. As you know, our women's tournament, because of UConn in the old days, was in Mohegan Sun, and we did great. We had great crowds. But now we've got our men's and women's combined, and our women have really enjoyed, obviously, being in the same place as the men, and they've enjoyed Dickey's Arena. So we have a long-term deal. I think we have another 6 years to run on that. We also could extend it down the road. As I mentioned, Matt Homan and his group also just do an outstanding job, and that makes a great deal of difference. We've had wonderful luck everywhere we've been. The people in Orlando, Hartford, Memphis have treated us great, but Matt and his group really appreciate having us there, And as I said, the weather's always pretty good. You have a lot to do in Fort Worth, and so many of our teams can get there easily. So to wrap up, it's a great venue for us. I think we will be there a long time. Our marketing partner, Learfield, likes the idea that we're in one place. It helps you build brand equity in that venue, and I think in the end it will serve us well.
Time for one more question. We'll go to Sean Pastor from Owls Daily, please. Sean, just to see you unmuted. Go ahead with your question, please.
Hi, Mike. Just curious if you could sort of sketch out the ramp up to the new structure of the league over the right. It's only 8 months away. When you sort of, get together and figure out structure, scheduling, and things like that.
Sean, you talking about how we're going to schedule our basketball going forward? Is that?
Yeah, broadly in the league, right? You got 8 months to figure things out with how the whole setup will be with the new teams coming in. Be it basketball.
Yeah. I think we'll have a seamless, integration of those teams into the conference. I think that basketball, we've decided to go to 18-game schedule. We continue 18-game schedule with the men and go to 18-game schedule with the women. We're still working on, how, we're going to figure, the actual schedule out with 14 teams. But again, Kari Black, who is taking over for Tom Jackson and his team, are studying that now, and we'll have an equitable approach. One thing we like to do, I guess you could argue that we backload our schedule a bit because we try to make sure that our prominent teams are playing each other at the end of the season. And this is not something new. This is something that conferences have done over the years. You want to make sure that, you feature your best games late in the year. And we've done that. We've had some memorable Memphis-Houston games the last few years, for example. So in terms of our scheduling, we try to be, it's very, very complicated, both men's and women's. We have a lot of games. We do games on, obviously ESPN. We have our CBS weekend games. We also have a large contingent of games on ESPN Plus, and it is a very, very complex process. And the time spent on it is just absolutely enormous. We've got a lot of expertise, though, in that area. Kari and Tom have worked together now for 6 years or so, and they know what the needs are of our athletic directors and our teams and our coaches. And basically, you try to set up essentially an equitable schedule that obviously doesn't, put people on the road too many times in a row. You try to make sure that if we can, we can, limit the amount of travel. We're a bit of a far-flung conference, although we're not as far-flung as some now. The Big Ten's going to go coast to coast. The Pac-12 goes pretty much north to south all the way, coast to coast, ACC as well. But we definitely are conscious of that part of scheduling. But again, I think we decided not to go at this point to a 20-game schedule. Whether we do down the road, I don't know. That's going to be up to our athletic directors with input, obviously, from their coaches. But right now, we're going to go with 18, and we're going to move the women to 18 because we feel we have a stronger conference than we did before, and we think 18 conference games is warranted. So I'm looking forward to working with our scheduling people to make sure we maximize our situation.
Commissioner Aresco, thank you so much for your time today. Really great to always hear about the exciting things going on in the conference, and really excited for the basketball season that we have ahead. Thank you. Thank
you, Morgan. It's going to be exciting, and it is almost upon us. I can't wait. I think it's going to be a great season for us. Thank you, and thanks again for all you do for us, and appreciate being here. Thank you. Appreciate it.